Mel Kiper just dropped his mock draft. I think this is the second version of his mock draft. Let's get right into it, man. Always fired up to really analyze Mel Kiper. The guy does have legit inside information. He knows some of the players that teams may be a little bit higher on than where the mock drafts are kind of at the moment. Let's get right into this. Mel Kiper believes the Houston Texans are going to trade up to the #1 spot with the Chicago Bears. The Texans currently have the #2 pick, Bears #1, and the Texans trade up and they get Bryce Young. Love the pick. I think Bryce Young is probably the best quarterback with the most upside. Obviously, his size does concern a lot of people. But I do think there's a lot more that goes into playing quarterback when you're not as tall or maybe not as big as some other quarterbacks. You really just got to figure it out and how it works for you. In the past, people wouldn't get drafted this high if they were, less than 6 feet. And the reports now are Bryce Young maybe 5'10" and a half. If that's true, we'll see what ends up happening. Texans love the pick. Now the Bears trade back to 2, but they trade up. They trade again. This time they're going to trade with the Colts. If the Bears are able to go from 1 to 2 and then from 2 to 4, that would be massive for the Chicago Bears. You're looking at multiple first-round picks, like 3 or 4 or 5 extra first-round picks with these teams. That would be very interesting if it ends up happening. The Colts trade up from 4 to 2 with the Bears in this mock draft, and the Colts take CJ Stroud, which is interesting. Bryce Young going 1, CJ Stroud going 2. Again, very interesting if you guys think about it, because a lot of people have Levis as the second quarterback, but the Colts obviously prefer CJ Stroud. Kind of interesting. And then the Cardinals take Will Anderson. This is the first pick I'm going to say I disagree with, but again, it's not my mock draft. It is Mel Kiper's. The Cardinals take Will Anderson. And although I have no issue with Will Anderson going ahead of Jalen Carter, I think Jalen Carter is a much, much better player. I think any team out there that's drafting is not going to take Will Anderson over Carter. I just don't see it happening. I think Carter goes as the first non-quarterback. Even if your team has a great defensive tackle, like even if the Rams or the Jets are picking at 3, they're taking a guy in Jalen Carter because the guy's generational, right? But regardless, you got the Cardinals taking Will Anderson and Jalen Carter at 4 for the Bears. If the Bears are able to make 2 trades and still get Jalen Carter, Ryan Poles would have killed this entire draft, and I'd be fired up for how the Bears are kind of building, because that is so many assets. Plus, you get Jalen Carter, the best player in this class. That'd be incredible in my opinion. Number 5, kind of interesting. You got the Seattle Seahawks, who are going to trade with the Carolina Panthers. Now, if the Panthers jump up from 9 to 5, that would be interesting, because the Panthers, in my opinion, need a quarterback. And if they jump up to 5, they're going to take Will Levis. Some people have speculated maybe the Panthers can get Derek Carr. Some people have also speculated that Carr's value may not be high. Maybe he's overestimating his value a little bit, which means if the Panthers do jump up, that would be very, very interesting in my opinion. But I love the pick for the Panthers. Will Levis, I think, has a lot of upside. The Detroit Lions take Christian Gonzalez, the first cornerback off the board, which is interesting because some people have Devon Witherspoon, who goes 7 to the Raiders. Other people have Christian Gonzalez, right, as their 1. So we'll see how it ends up. But these are the 2 corners that are getting a lot of hype. There's a couple other guys. We'll obviously see that in this mock draft. We're going to get at least 4 or 5 corners going in the first round this year. So it's going to be interesting to see how these guys kind of progress over the course of their careers. Love the pick for the Lions. Love the pick for the Raiders. I'm a big Devon Witherspoon guy. I watched his tape. The guy's strong, good tackler, physical. And he's good in coverage. And I would say he's not great in coverage in my opinion, but he is good, right? And I think part of what you have to keep in mind with Witherspoon is playing at Illinois, you don't play the best competition. You're not playing CJ Stroud and you're not playing the top wide receivers, but I definitely see the upside in him, right? And you shouldn't hold where he plays against him, right? We saw that with Sauce Gardner last year, right? You shouldn't hold it against him, although with Gardner, we did see his tape against Alabama, right? 1 game against Alabama, he looked like a superstar in that game, right? The Falcons, interestingly, take Will Mcdonald. Crazy, and I want to talk about this a little bit. Will Mcdonald, if you guys remember, I did a top 12 defensive end video just recently, right? Less than a month ago. Will McDonald was my number 3 player on the board. On the defensive end board. The only guys I had ahead of him were Tyree Wilson and Will Anderson, and Will Mcdonald was number 3. And he's now being projected as the 8th overall pick by Mel Kiper, which means he's about, his stock is about to rise, as it should. The guy's a fantastic pass rusher, fantastic hand-to-hand combat, great technique. And for the Falcons, you pair up Will Mcdonald with Arnold Ebiketie, with some of those other defensive linemen that they already kind of have. They have some good linebackers, some good secondary pieces. This Falcons defense is going to get so much better. And if they do, in fact, go with Will Mcdonald at 8, you're allowing, you're allowing your team to kind of start building for the future, right? Building the right way. Have some good defensive players. So I love the pick for the Falcons at 8. Then the Seattle Seahawks, who traded back with the Panthers, get Anthony Richardson at 9. Now, personally, if you're looking into getting Anthony Richardson at 9, the thing I would disagree with Mel here is you take him at 5, right? Because there's no guarantee he's going to be available at 9. And quarterback's not, it's not a tackle. If you miss out on a tackle, oh well. You miss out on a center, a guard, a DN, oh well, right? But a quarterback's a much different position. You don't trade from 5 to 9, especially with a team like the Raiders, right? If Anthony Richardson's there at 7, I'm taking him if I'm the Raiders. So for the Seahawks to get Richardson, it's a trade back, doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But I do love the pick because for me, when I look at the Seahawks, Geno Smith isn't worth $30+ million. That too, you're gonna pay a quarterback $30+ million. What about the rest of the roster? What about filling the defensive spots? And I don't think the Seahawks need to add anything to their offense. Honestly, I just think they need a quarterback to lead them. You put Aaron Rodgers on the Seahawks offense, for example, that's a top 3 or 4 offense based off of the weapons they have, right? 2 great receivers, a tight end with a lot of upside, a great young running back, a top 7 offense line, in my opinion. Anthony Richardson to the Seahawks makes a ton of sense. I think it sets them up to make Super Bowl runs over the next 5 years. Maybe not in the next 1 to 2 years, but from year 3, 4, and 5 with Richardson, I think that's a Super Bowl bound team, man. I would love that to happen. Then the Eagles take Peter Skronoski. I think Mel Kiper in his last draft had the Eagles taking defensive tackle Kalijah Kancey. I like Peter Skronoski more for the Eagles. The Eagles are going to have to replace Isaac Samala, their right guard. Jason Kelsey, some people are saying, may retire. They have the center spot already covered with Cam Jurgens, right? They drafted him last year in the 2nd round. Going to be a great football player, in my opinion. If the Eagles get Peter Skronoski, he can play right guard. Now, you could technically draft him and have him play tackle, right? But I don't know. He's not going to replace Lane Johnson, right? The only way he'd play right tackle is if Lane Johnson were to retire this year, which could possibly happen. Although I do think he plans to play. And then at left tackle, you have Malata, and he's a young football player still, and he's pretty good. But you could look to upgrade. But again, I probably wouldn't do that if I'm the Eagles. I think Skronoski at right guard makes a lot of sense. He's a plug-and-play starter, right? He's the best pure offensive lineman in this class, according to a lot of people. Now, the interesting thing would be at 10, do you draft the right guard, right? That's going to be the thing to really consider. I know Howie Roseman loves to take offensive linemen and defensive linemen early, but I don't know if he loves to take right guards early, right? If you're drafting Skronoski to be a pure guard, and if you are going to take a guard, why not take the best guard in this class, right? Which is O'Cyrus Torrence. Again, I don't know if I agree with it, but Mel Kiper's draft, I would love the pick regardless. And the Titans take Paris Johnson. I think a lot of people have this pick kind of hand in hand here, which makes sense, right? The Titans do need some offensive tackle help. They obviously just cut Taylor Lewan. The Texans get Tyree Wilson. I don't know how Wilson falls to 12, but if it happens, I love the pick for the Houston Texans. The Texans have a lot of options, right? They obviously traded up early. They got the first, they traded in this mock draft, first overall pick. They take their quarterback. Now they get the defensive end. I can see that definitely happening, and it makes the Texans a much better team, right? Then the Jets take what I would say is the surprisingest pick in this draft, which is Anton Harrison, number 13th overall pick to the New York Jets, tackle out of Oklahoma. That's crazy to think. Anton Harrison. Now, some people are projecting him as a first-round pick. A lot of the mocks that I've seen have him as a late first-round pick. I don't see it. I think he's a good football player. Don't get me wrong. After Darnell Wright, after Peter Skronoski, depending on if you think he's a tackle or not. Anton Harrison makes the argument for the third best tackle, as does Broderick Jones, as does Paris Johnson. All three of those guys make the case for the third best tackle. But I don't think any of those three guys are first round tackles. I think they're all developmental pieces. I think Paris Johnson and Broderick Jones, Paris Johnson specifically has the most upside between those three guys, but he also has the most bust potential. Anton Harrison, I think, is just a solid football player. His upside may not be the highest, but he may be ahead of those other two guys at the moment. So obviously it'll be interesting if Anton Harrison actually goes to the Jets. But the Jets do need a tackle, so I think the fit makes a whole lot of sense. Then the Patriots take Jackson Smith and Najigba. This may be my favorite pick right here for in this entire mock draft, because I think there's a lot of a fit, right? A fit perspective there. For me, I really think the Patriots need to get Mac Jones some help. You know, you can take a cornerback, you can take a defensive end if you're the Patriots, but do you really need that? Or do you need some offensive firepower? And I think that's what the Patriots have to do. Get some weapons, man. Such a great defensive scheme, right? The Patriots defense every year scores like 5, 6, 7 touchdowns. Every year they're leading the league in fumbles and turnovers and interceptions and all that good stuff. But they never have talent, right? And it's kind of proven to be fact. Ever since Tom Brady has left, like, they've never really had weapons, and you gotta get Mac Jones weapons. I love this pick right here. Then the Packers take Michael Mayer. I don't agree with the Packers taking a tight end. I don't think it makes a whole lot of sense. But I definitely understand how you'd say let's get some weapons for Aaron Rodgers or Jordan Love, especially if Love takes over. You want him to feel comfortable, and having a top 5 tight end, which Michael Mayer is projected to be, definitely benefits a quarterback. But I personally don't like the pick, but it's not my mock draft. Then the Commanders take Darnell Wright. Love the fact that we're seeing Darnell Wright go higher. Wright is the best tackle in this class. I've said this for over 2 months at this point, and I'm going to continue saying it until the draft actually happens. Darnell Wright is the best. He's the best tackle, and it's not close. Like, the guy has advanced technique. Guy is a fantastic football player, in my opinion. He knows how to snatch and trap consistently. Every 5 plays, he's snatching someone's hands down. That's going to make that defensive end gas. It's going to continue to make him process what a guy may do. At the same time, you know, he'll reach really well inside out and outside. I do think he needs to get quicker. I think his biggest issue is his footwork. Sometimes off isn't consistent. It's not great, but he's still the best tackle in this class. I don't care about upside, right? To me, when a couple years back, when we had Penei Sewell, Rashawn Slater go 1 and 2, I had Christian Darrisaw as my number 3 guy because he's just a great football player on tape. And I think that's the same thing with Darnell Wright. He's just a great football player. He's going to be one of the best tackles in the NFL, in my opinion. And so many teams are going to take Paris Johnson and Peter Skronoski. They're going to all be wrong, and they're going to all regret it. Guarantee you guys that right now. Love the pick for the Commanders. Obviously, it'll be interesting to see if he plays right tackle, because personally, I think Sam Cosmi, aka Samuel Cosmi, right? I know him as Samuel Cosmi because that's what he went by when he was at Texas, and we kind of did the film breakdown. I had Samuel Cosmi with a late first to early second round grade, and I believe he was a second round pick. The guy's a top 7 right tackle in the NFL if he's able to just have two or three things really click. In my opinion, he's arguably the best run blocker in the NFL. Arguably. All guards, all tackles, all centers. Samuel Cosmi is arguably the best run blocker in the NFL. Now, obviously, there's 2 phases within the game, run blocking and pass blocking, and he has to get better at pass blocking. But the guy has good technique, right? He knows how to jump set, fake jump set, get back into pass pro. He knows how to snatch people's arms. He knows how to win with his hands. I personally think Samuel Cosmi, I think the Commanders are much higher on Cosmi than Mel Kiper, maybe, right? I don't know if Mel Kiper watches Cosmi's tape, but we may do a film breakdown on him on the second channel because I think he's a great football player. He did give up sacks. I've studied some of his sacks from this past year. I think he gave up like 7 sacks. They weren't like he just got his ass kicked, right? They're like the quarterback held on to the ball a little bit too long. Michael Parsons beat him. It's not like he's getting beat by like the 8th defensive end on whatever team, right? I think Cosmi's gonna be a really good football player. The Steelers take Joey Porter Jr. Love the pick. Joey Porter, in my opinion, has the most upside out of all the corners in this class. I know he goes to Penn State, or he played at Penn State. I know some people may hold that against him a little bit, but I think the guy has the best ball skills in this class. The guy knows how to find the football. I think Porter has the potential to be the best player at the cornerback position out of this class. Then the Lions take Drew Sanders, which is interesting. That's the first linebacker taken ahead of Trenton Simpson, which is kind of interesting. I personally am a Simpson guy, but I love Drew Sanders as well. Kind of interesting. So we'll see if this kind of holds up, and we'll see if he is the real first linebacker out of this class. There's only 2 first-round linebackers, in my opinion, Sanders and Simpson. Going to be interesting. The Buccaneers follow it up, taking Emmanuel Forbes. Kind of a questionable pick, in my opinion. Is Forbes really a first-round cornerback? I don't know. I think there are for sure 3 first-round cornerbacks. I think 2 other guys will go in the first round. I think Forbes is one of those guys. The Seahawks get Myles Murphy. Personally, I don't know if I'm a big Myles Murphy guy. You guys know how I feel about him. I mentioned this in the past. I'm not that high on him. I think he's not going to be the best football player. He doesn't have the hand-to-hand combat that I always talk about. You got to win with your hands, and he doesn't. So for me, and for that reason, he's fallen on my board personally, right? Obviously, we'll see how high he actually goes. I know people talk about his physical traits. He's like 6'4" or 6'5", right? So it's not like he's massive, and he's so much bigger than every other defensive end. Like, we're seeing DNs that are 6'4", 6'5", 6'6", consistently in the league. But, you look at all these guys, who are the best DNs? They're guys that can pass rush. They're guys that can win with their hands. The Crosbys, the Bozas. These guys win with their hands, and Myles Murphy just doesn't show it. I would not touch this guy in the first round. Personally, I don't see it. Obviously, Mel Kiper has him going 20th. I think he may end up being a second round pick. Like, I wouldn't be surprised. I just don't see it with him. The Chargers take Jordan Addison. I think this is a great fit. I think the Chargers are missing that guy that's quicker, faster, maybe not as big, that could, take a 15-yard pass the distance. And I think Jordan Addison is that great route runner. I know some people love Joshua Palmer, but I just don't think Palmer is a great receiver. We've seen games where he has 10 plus targets, and I just don't see it with him. Obviously, Keenan Allen may be a salary cap cut, but you still got Mike Williams, Addison. I think that's a perfect fit for the Chargers. Then the Ravens, get Zay Flowers, which I love. I think Zay Flowers, my comp for him is Deebo Samuel, because I think the way Zay Flowers kind of plays is kind of how Deebo Samuel plays, and if he goes to the Ravens, this is a perfect fit. The Ravens know how to use weapons, and Zay Flowers is a weapon, man. Don't be surprised if Flowers ends up going as a top 16, 17 pick. I think the guy's going to be really, really, really good. Don't be surprised if he's the number 1 receiver taken, right? Don't be surprised if that ends up happening. The Vikings take Deonte Banks, another cornerback that I think ends up going in the first round. That may have a round 2 grade from me. I'll be the first to tell you guys, when I watched Banks, I only watched one of his games because I only had one game available of Maryland, specifically the defense. He looked good, right? He looked good. He looked like one of those guys that has good size. He could tackle really, really well. And he can get his hands on the football, although I do think that once he gets into the league, he may get called for a lot of holds and those type of things, right? He's really a man coverage corner, but he definitely a lot of handsy types of plays. Could be a pass interference in the NFL. Obviously, the game's much faster from Maryland to the NFL. I think that could cause some issues for him, but his upside's definitely there as well. The Jacksonville Jaguars take Lucas Van Ness, 24th overall. Another guy that I really, really like. For the Jags specifically, this is a great fit in my opinion. Love the pick. Then the Giants take Quentin Johnson. Interesting pick, right? The Giants just cut Kenny Golladay, and I guess Johnston would be the Kenny Golladay replacement, right? Love the pick for the Giants. Although, Saquon Barkley may not be back, would you consider a running back here? Bijan Robinson, Jamar Gibbs. I do think there's about 7 running backs in this class. I think this running back class is going to be the best running back class in the last 10 years. I really think that. I think this class is about to be great. So maybe the Giants wait until round 2. The Cowboys take Dalton Kincaid. Hate the pick, man. I love the player. Don't get me wrong. But I just don't agree with taking a tight end in the first round. If you want one of the best tight ends, go pay the guy. Like, go get Noah Fant, go get Evan Ingram, go get one of these guys that's already in the league, because the upside just isn't there to take one of these tight ends in the first round. How many tight ends have been picked in the first round now, and they're not even with the same team past, when the 5th year comes around? They're with the whole new team. It's happened a lot. And Kyle Pitts may be the next guy where we're going to say this tight end just never worked out. Tight ends in the first round for me are a very tricky position to draft, because tight ends are a very difficult position to have a lot of production out of, right? Travis Kelce is the number 1 tight end in the NFL by distance. After that, maybe it's George Kittle, maybe it's Darren Waller, and that's like scheme specific as well, right? I think the Cowboys could potentially take a guard here, right? O'Cyrus Torrence, the guy a lot of people have mocked to the Cowboys. Maybe they take a center potentially, right? And you may move Biadish to left guard, right? That's definitely something they can do as well. Again, I don't know if the Cowboys need an offensive line either, because I do think they have a top 5 to 7 offensive line already in the league. Maybe you take a corner, a safety. I believe Brian Branch has not been drafted, which is kind of crazy. That comes to my mind. I would take Brian Branch if I'm the Cowboys right here. He's arguably the 3rd best player in this entire class, non-quarterback speaking, right? Then the Buffalo Bills, Bijan Robinson, love the pick for the Bills. To me, this is the guy, man, the guy to be had. Obviously, he's a running back, and you don't want to pay running backs. You don't want to draft running backs high, right? A top 7 pick for a running back doesn't make sense. But Robinson is a top 7 player. He's arguably the 2nd best player in this class after Jalen Carter, overall player. Obviously, positional value makes a big difference. That's going to be interesting, man. If the Bills somehow land Bijan Robinson, that would be fantastic for them, in my opinion. Then the Bengals take Luke Musgrave, the 3rd tight end. That's crazy. Remember, we said this. There's something like 4 or 5 tight ends when the draft actually happens that could potentially go in the first round. Now, I think teams are going to value tight ends more, carefully. They're going to be more aware of kind of how they pan out in the NFL, and they're less likely to take these guys. But keep in mind, this draft is also weird, right? We don't have a lot of good tackles. We don't have a lot of good guards, centers. There's probably 2 guys that have first-round grades, right? Or I should say probably 3, right? You got Peter Skronoski, Darnell Wright, O'Cyrus Torrence, and Schmitz out of Minnesota. Those are probably the 4 guys that have first-round grades. But centers don't generally go in the first round either, right? So, after those 4 guys, even receivers, there's probably 3 guys with first-round grades. Tight ends, there's probably like 4 or 5. So we'll see what ends up happening. The Bengals and the Saints take tight ends back-to-back. Darnell Washington goes 29th to the Saints. Luke Musgrave, 28th. Obviously, these tight ends are all a little bit different. Kincaid out of Utah is a pass catcher. Musgrave is a pass catcher. Darnell Washington's a true inline tight end, a 6'7" beast. But is he worth the first-round pick? I don't know, right? That one's going to be kind of interesting. Then the Eagles take Elijah Cansey. Remember we mentioned this when the Eagles picked at 10. They took Peter Skronoski in last mock draft that Mel Kiper did, I think about a month ago. Elijah Cansey was the 10th overall pick. Now he's the 30th, but he's still going to the Eagles. I love the pick. I think outside of Jalen Carter, Elijah Cansey is the best pass rushing defensive tackle. Yeah, he's 280. He's 6 foot, 280. But so was Warren Sapp, right? Warren Sapp wasn't much bigger than Elijah Cansey coming out. Again, I think Cansey being undersized isn't that big of a deal if you're putting him on a team like the Eagles, who have Jordan Davis, who have guys like Fletcher Cox and Josh Sweat. Hargrave could be brought back. When you have all these different type of guys, right? Some guys are 6'6", some guys are 6 feet. You utilize them in the best possible way. And for me, Cansey comes in on 2nd and 3rd downs. That's going to be the best way to utilize him. The Chiefs wrap it up by taking Broderick Jones. I think that's a good piece for the Chiefs to take. I believe Orlando Brand could be franchise tagged once again. If that happens, Broderick Jones could be brought in and then he develops for a year. Broderick Jones, I think, also has a lot of upside. For me, I think he's going to be a really good football player. I would say Broderick Jones has probably the second most upside among the tackles, right? Paris Johnson has the most. Broderick Jones has the second most. Keep in mind, upside doesn't mean a whole lot, right? Upside could just mean a guy never pans out and they end up being a bust. Overall, it's kind of interesting. You know, Mel Kiper is the guy that has a lot of inside information. He's the guy that a lot of people rely on. Let's just be honest. Most people who create mock drafts pull up Mel Kiper's mock draft, Todd McShay's. They'll pull up a couple others from, like, you know, these other sites, and they'll kind of just base their own mock draft around these guys' mock draft. Like, they don't do their actual research, right? We factually know that to be fact. Because when Kalijah Cansey, although his tape backed it up, but when Mel Kiper put him as the 10th overall pick, all of a sudden Cansey's now being projected as a first-round pick everywhere. But before that, he was like the 80th pick, right? But again, I think Mel Kiper does a pretty good job. I do think there's a lot of tight ends. I don't know if that many tight ends go, but let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Thumbs up, subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time with another video.